Alright guys, Madaz promised you more awesome free content this week, and he's exactly delivering just that. Today we are going to talk about a very important concept that I'm sure a lot of you guys will find very useful. We're going to talk about how to recognize when a bounce isn't going to work, or how do you know when the bounce is going to be a failed bounce. Now obviously, I'm sure you guys paid attention to the random offering news that hit today midday on IDXG, which was the IT stock of the day up until that point. Stock ran from, below 3, hitting a high of 445 right before the 11 o'clock low hour that I always talk about. And then boom, a huge bombshell on this 11:18 candle. Stock drops from 430 down to just $3 in just 2 3-minute candles. I mean, that's a pretty substantial move no matter how you look at it. And I'm sure this got a lot of the haters, all going crazy, thinking, oh, Madaz probably blew up. He's a loser. Strategy doesn't work. He sucks. Well, guess what? Not only did I not lose money, I ended up making a good amount of money. But on top of that, I mentioned multiple times in my FAQs. If you guys go to my website, madazmoney.com, in my FAQs, I said, when are these setups? And these setups regarding my go-to setups, right? I put it right there in plain words, plain English. When do they not work? When there's random news and when there's unnatural price action. And I'm sure some of the haters will still be like, oh, you added that today. Whatever. Right? Well, guess what? If you actually search for Madaz FAQs on Twitter, you can see that I actually posted this in 2015. So, almost 2 years ago. And I pretty much cut and pasted the same thing onto my website with some minor changes here and there and some of the other questions, but I didn't change that one. You can kind of see right there, again, in plain English. Okay, so definitely this is something that I've already mentioned in the past, and those of you that have been following me very closely probably have read that before, and you probably avoided this and got away with it unscathed, and realized that it was not a washout long that you want to jump in, and decided to switch to short instead. And, good on you. So to say that, yeah, I mean, obviously not all strategies will work all the time, but you got to be smart about it, and we're going to talk about how to recognize these things and avoid them in the future. So for washout longs, to clarify, for it to be a washout, it usually drops. Obviously not all the time, but majority of the time it will drop to a key support level and or VWAP. Many times the VWAP and the support level will often coincide just because of the nature of the way things work. So I was anticipating a drop to about 380 first on the soft support, and then 360, which is where the VWAP was approximately around, I believe, at that time. So if this stock just blew past all these supports like nothing, that's pretty much a telltale sign that there's some negative force out there, some catalyst that's driving the stock lower, and this is not a natural organic washout. Okay, let me make that clear. Normally a stock, when it drops on a washout, for a washout long, if it's an organic move, it will drop more often than not always, but more often than not, to a very key support level, typically coinciding with VWAP as well, and it would typically bounce from there. Okay, assuming that there's organic price action. Now, IDXG was already not trading organically to begin with. It was trading kind of choppy. It was kind of grinding, kind of like CBLI was yesterday. And I was noting that on Twitter multiple times. I kept saying that I was sitting on my hands. I was waiting for something to speed up a little bit, the action to speed up a little bit. I just didn't like the way the thing was trading, so I just didn't really touch it. And when I did, I traded it with relatively small size and stayed safe. Now, again, you want to look for a washout to go to a support level. And if you were watching the level 2, and unfortunately I didn't get a chance to record this on tape, Next time in the future, I'll probably make a part 2 of this on this topic, just so you guys see it live in action on the level 2. So unfortunately, without the level 2 action and the tape, I can only talk about the chart. But just focus on the chart for now, and you can kind of see that this stock just blew through all supports in just one candle. This is not normal, okay? And look at the volume as well, 1.5 million shares after a period of time where the stock was struggling to trade over 500,000 shares, or a couple times where it got close to a million, but it had 3 consecutive candles, the third candle being 2 million shares, 2.1 million shares to be exact. So you got pretty much like 4 million shares, 3.5, almost 4 million shares traded in a span of 3 3-minute candles, or 9 minutes. Okay, so high volume, a huge red candle blowing through all supports usually denotes that there's probably something going on. It's not a typical washout long, guys. So how do you know that? Obviously, one of the fastest ways, if you have some sort of news service that you can kind of pay attention to, or maybe a chat room where they alert it, and then you know right away. So if you attempted to buy this long right here, you would just get out and right away and recognize that something's not right, okay? Secondly, let's just say you were in and you didn't get the news and you didn't get the memo or whatever. Usually if its stock drops from 430 to 339, it would usually probably bounce pretty nice from here. This kind of a drop usually would bounce probably at least back to 360, you would think. But you can kind of see that it didn't do that. It dropped even lower. It dropped from 440, 434 down to 338, and instead of typically probably bouncing back towards 360, and even then that's a fairly conservative bounce, although there is resistance here. Usually if you drop $1, you would expect the stock to bounce at least 30 cents, right? 20, 30 cents, whatever, right? But instead of doing that, the stock drops another 38 cents or whatever it is right here. So almost another 40-cent drop on top of the $1 drop that it already suffered, the previous candle before. So when you see that kind of sell pressure, okay, with no bounce, you better believe something is up. So how do you avoid this in the future? I would highly recommend you get some sort of a news service and understand to read the tape a lot better. If you can kind of tell that there's a relentless sell pressure, you better believe that you shouldn't be, averaging down at the very least. If you take a starter and you recognize, something's going on, just get the hell out right away and just forget about it, and then maybe switch to shorts or something like that, because clearly something is not right here and you shouldn't step in front of a moving train, right? Now, secondly, those of you that have lost all your profits on the day, I did see some tweets of people saying that they lost their profits on the day. First of all, this is a different problem in itself, because you shouldn't be sizing to the point where you be risking your profits from the morning. I always preach downsizing your profits after the open, because after the open, that's when the action gets a little bit more sketchy because of the nature of the way things work. It gets more crowded, the volume gets lower, the algos take over, right? I always talk about that. So as time goes on, more bullshit can happen, essentially, okay? For lack of a better term. Like in this case, this is like one of the biggest bullshit you can experience, like random bombshell news that tanks the stock like 30% in like a couple minutes, right? So, that being said, you got to protect yourself from these kind of things, right? You got to protect yourself from chop, you got to protect yourself from grind, you got to protect yourself from, bid props and grinding algos, trying to take your money, right? Trying to bleed you out, right? And of course, you got to protect yourself from random news events and stuff like that. So as time goes on, you got to downsize. So if you got caught in this dump, okay, that's fine if you kind of didn't know or whatever. But if you were in and you kept averaging down, or you oversized or whatever, you sized inappropriately such that you risked all your profits on the day, that's a different problem in itself. You gotta learn to manage risk and downsize your positions after the open, just because the way things are. Okay, so plays. The high probability plays are always usually going to be at the open. As time goes on, things get more difficult, and if you guys have been trading long enough and you guys have been following me on long enough, I always stress this point. As a matter of fact, it's another thing that's also on the FAQs, or some example of low percentage plays, right? You could read this for yourself. Madaz money.com. You go to the FAQs at the top. Okay, right there, trading during the dead hours, right? Stocks that have high probability of halting. IDXG halted on this dump. Okay, always do a running calculation in your head. Negative 10% or positive 10%, in this case it's the downside, is going to result in a circuit breaker halt. Stock tanks 10%, and over a 5-minute rolling period, it's going to result in a circuit breaker halt. So you don't want to get stuck in the halt, right? You know, IDXG, you know, it tanks $1, halts, and then tanks another 40 cents. You know, you bag held this, you lost another 40 cents. So that's another thing. So news-driven events, okay? Trading during the dead hours, and stocks that have a high probability of halting, and also trading a ticker with obvious manipulation. It's all there, guys. I lay it all out there for you guys. All you gotta do is do your research, look it up. So that being said, guys, hopefully this helps. You know, in the future, like I said, I'm going to try to record this live with the level 2 and the tape. So I'll try to make a part 2 to this video. But for now, we're just going to go with the basics, get this out there so people don't get caught, so you understand next time, you know, there's a dump, you understand not to stand in front of the moving train, or if you're unfortunately in, you know, to get out right away and maybe switch to the other side or something like that. So that being said, guys, hopefully this helps. See you guys next time.